This episode contains discussions around mental illness. Discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs help, please contact a local support agency.
And welcome to Tuku Talks, the podcast where we talk about shit that matters to rangatahi. I'm Janaye Henry.
I'm Turia Schmidt-Piquet.
And as always, we're sitting in the boots of our cars in a car park. That does mean we're out in the wild mother nature. You might hear all the noises. I'm hearing cicadas. I'm hearing vehicles. You might hear them too. It's all good. It's all part of the music. Today we're talking about a kaupapa that's super important. We're talking about mental health. And we are joined by none other than Genevieve Mora. Kia ora.
Kia ora, lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, can you just introduce yourself? Tell us a general overview, age, star sign, anything else?
Yeah, star sign. So I'm Virgo. No, I'm Genevieve. People call me Jen, G Giraffe. I'm 27 years old, 27 years young. I'm from Auckland, New Zealand, and I'm the co-founder of a mental health charity called Voices of Hope, and that's my 9 to 5. It's my job, and I am so passionate about it, and I'm so excited to share with you guys today a bit more about it.
Awesome. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of Voices of Hope and what you do?
Completely. So Voices of Hope started in 2017. Myself and a friend, Jazz Thornton, were connected by a mutual friend of ours, and very quickly we realised that we'd both gone through our own battles of mental illness. I've fought a battle with an eating disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety, and Jazz has gone through her own struggles, and we both felt the need to, I guess, create a platform that we wish we'd had when we were unwell. There was nowhere to turn to see stories of hope and to see, I guess, stories and people that had gone through what we were going through. So we're like, we're going to create it. We started by sitting down with a bunch of our friends, not in the boots of our cars, but we did sit down with them, and we asked them about their own journeys with their mental health, really focused on, I guess, the positives, the tools and the skills that they used to get to where they are today. So yeah, it's all about storytelling and sharing the lived experience voice.
What platforms do you use to tell that story?
We like to think that we were like one of the first to use social media. So we launched Voices of Hope. Jazz and I were both 18 at the time, so a few years ago now. And we started off on Facebook, which was like popping back there. It's not as good right now, but you know, Facebook. Instagram, we've recently joined TikTok. I signed up to LinkedIn. I don't know how to use LinkedIn, but we're on LinkedIn because apparently it's professional. But yeah, social media was our main platform, and we found it really beneficial for us because we can reach people where they are. I think when people are struggling with their mental health, you know, sometimes it can be really hard to leave the house. So the fact that we can create content that they can find from the comfort of their bedroom or their lounge or their car, you know, is a really powerful thing.
For the rangatahi that don't know, generally, what would you say is mental health?
It's a great question. First of all, mental health is something we all have. I think, you know, I think people tend to think it's, you know, something that only some of us deal with. Or they instantly think of the bad thing. And I guess the way that and I've asked myself a lot this, the way that I explain mental health is it's almost like on a spectrum. So we all have good days, we all have bad days. You know, sometimes we're feeling a bit brighter than we are at other times of the day or you know, life, whatever it may be. But mental health is something that we all have, and it's really, really important that we are, you know, working on ourselves daily and making sure or doing our best to stay on top of our mental health because it's really important for our well-being.
I don't know if it's insensitive, but could you tell us more about kind of your experience through mental illness? I just know,
not insensitive at all.
Sometimes people, because people out there, I think there's stigma like don't ask those questions.
No, I'm an open book. Okay. The things I won't talk about is numbers and weights and all that sort of stuff because it's not helpful to anyone. But in terms of, you know, my own journey, I had a very privileged childhood. I've got 2 parents that love each other and are still together, and a beautiful little sister.
Shout out.
I grew up, you know, feeling very loved and supported, and I still am to this day. It was around the age of 10 years old where I remember walking into the kitchen one night, and Dad was watching the news, and quite a graphic news piece came on the television about something quite violent that had happened out in the community. And I don't know what it was, but my 10-year-old brain instantly flipped a switch and was like, "You're going to be next. like someone's going to come and hurt you. And as a 10-year-old, that was a really scary feeling. I genuinely thought that I was going to be hurt. And so the way that I describe it, in order to, I guess, deal with those anxieties and those worries and those fears, was that I started checking things around me. So before I went to bed, I checked my cupboards, I checked my curtains, I checked under my bed, I checked my roof, I checked outside my door, I checked, my cupboards, whatever it may have been, etc. You get where I'm going with this. But eventually around the age of, 12 years old, and this is a very quick kind of overview, my checking behaviours or my repetitive behaviours were taking up a large portion of my day. And I genuinely believed at that point that if I didn't engage in these behaviours, that someone was going to come and hurt me. And I was eventually diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. And I think that's another thing that is very misunderstood. When people think of OCD, they often think of or go back to, I guess, again, what is often portrayed in terms of people being really clean and tidy and organised.
I thought it was a tidy person.
Yeah, completely. And it's so much deeper than that. There are different subtypes, again, of OCD, but mine was around checking and doing repetitive behaviours and doing things, or these compulsions, because it eased my anxiety temporarily. So just to kind of, cherry on the top and, icing on the cake, anorexia decided to jump on board. And I think the way that I described that kind of journey was that my OCD gave me, I guess, a perceived sense of control for a short period of time. It helped ease my anxiety, or so I thought it did. And when that was no longer enough, my mind went looking for something else that I could control, or thought I could control, and that became food. So for me, it was never that I started off on a diet. I didn't look in the mirror and was like, I don't like myself. It was never something I actively tried to pursue, which I think a lot of people think that, people with eating disorders are just vain and want to, change their body and aren't happy with the way they are. It was just a snowball effect of multiple things.
Do you find that that's common in some people, that once they have like kind of one mental illness, it's kind of easy to kind of roll into other ones?
Yeah, so I think there are with mental illness, there's a lot of, they call them comorbidities. So there are a lot of them that kind of link in. So OCD and eating disorders are often quite closely linked. And there's, other examples of that too. But there are people that may just have the one diagnosis, and there may be people that have 10, It's everyone's journey is different.
When you were in that space, what were the things that helped you, heal or recover?
Yeah, so I got to the point where I was admitted to hospital. So I had really intensive treatment, which crazily, I talk about being very lucky for that, and people are like, you're lucky that you went into hospital, and I'm like, I am, because I was given the care that I believe everyone deserves. And I think there's a real lack of resource and support available for youth and children and adults in New Zealand when it comes to mental health and mental illness. A huge part of my healing journey, or my recovery journey, was the support of people around me. Again, my tight-knit family. My parents were my rocks. Without them, I genuinely don't think I'd be here today. I had to choose recovery. I think people, don't understand that recovery is a choice. You can have your psychologist or your therapist or your counsellor, whatever you want to call it, telling you what you should do, but it's up to you to do the work, which can be really challenging. And then a big thing for me was like goals and dreams and like future thinking. Like I knew I want to have a family someday. I wanted to marry Nick Jonas. Do you guys remember the Jonas Brothers?
Yes, absolutely.
He's so still around.
So I was like,
Nick.
Yeah, weird, eh? I don't know what I was thinking, but Nick was like...
I mean, they had a baby recently, eh?
Yeah, I feel like they've all got kids now.
Joe. I know. It was all about Joe.
It was Nick. So I thought I was going to marry Nick Jonas.
As long as it wasn't Kevin, I reckon.
Poor Kevin. He's so left alone all the
Shout
time.
outs to Kevin Jonas, though.
Yeah, but he was settled, married, and got the kids first.
You're right.
He won that race.
Now.
He won.
But yeah, thought I was going to marry Nick Jonas. But just having like goals, I wanted to, go back to school, for example, or I wanted to be able to go out with my friends and, go to parties. And so having these really tangible things to work towards was really important for me.
Cool.
I like that you said that your whānau helped you a lot through all of that. Is there kind of like any advice you have for people that actually have zero support, and they're kind of like a lone wolf in all of this.
Yeah, completely. I think we've got to be realistic. That's
Yeah.
a lot of the, it's the case for a lot of people. And I think what I like to share with people is that, your whānau, your immediate family don't need to necessarily be your only support. You've got friends, you've got families. If you're in a school environment, our youth, talking to teachers, talking to your deans, talking to your librarian, and then going even broader than that. There are helplines, Youthline, 0800 WhatsApp. There's places that you can call and talk to people and I guess share how you're feeling, free counselling online. So although it can be really hard to take that initial step and ask for help, asking for help is one of the first steps towards getting better. And I think as like friends and whānau and the people around, we need to not wait for our friends and loved ones to reach out, but we need to reach in and we need to ask them how they're going and, pick up the phone and say, how are you really? Actually have these conversations because you never know, what sort of stuff you may be faced with.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because obviously in an ideal world people would feel like safe and comfortable enough to reach out, but that's like very hard. So as the friends and whānau members of, people generally, how can we as just like chillin' peeps be better at checking in and like how do we authentically see how each other are actually doing?
It's a great question. And I think depending on your friendship dynamic or who you're with, it may change, but I think I always find it really helpful to just first of all reach out, and again that seems really baseline and basic, but actually reach out. And when someone says, how are you, and they go, I'm really, really good, like we do in New Zealand, we're good, oh yeah, how are you, I'm fine, thank you, move on. Be like, how are you really, like how are you going, tell me a bit more about what's going on for you. I guess when you notice that a friend or loved one may be struggling, I think it's really important to tell them that you're willing to listen and you want to be that listening ear for them. I think it can be really easy to want to give advice, but sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen to them and validate their concerns and their feelings, and obviously lead them towards some professional help. Back to your question around, you were talking about, repeat around the...
Yeah, no, that was basically
it?
Like how do we reach out? But I guess continuing on from that, I remember being young. I'm still young, but I remember being younger actually. And in high school, like everyone was going through everything all the time because it's such a turbulent time. And I often, as a 14, 15-year-old, felt overwhelmed because I didn't know how to best support my friends who were going through these really heavy things.
Yeah, completely.
I didn't know like what I could or had the power to do. Obviously, it's easier now. I like flats, so I have a whare and I can like, I have a car and I can drive around. But to those sort of like that age group, what do you reckon they, what steps can they take?
So I think the first thing that I want to remind people is that it's not your job to fix your loved one or your friend. The best thing you can sometimes do is just be a friend for them and support them, I guess, where they are. I think, again, like you said, even having these conversations can be really difficult, but I like to talk about, I guess, role modelling. Something that we've found through Voices of Hope is that when one person shares their story, it creates a really safe environment for someone else to share. So being like, hey mate, like, I'm having a real tough time at the moment, I'm real stressed about exams, because that may bring something out of your friend too. And I'm not saying make up scenarios, but if you just share a piece of yourself with someone else and role model, then they may be more willing to do that too. And I think, for friends and whānau, it's really important that you're practicing self-care. It can be really emotionally draining supporting someone that's struggling with their mental health, and so you need to look after yourself. I love quotes, and there's a quote, it's like you can't pour from an empty cup, and I think it's so true. You need to fill your cup, you need to keep on top of yourself and your well-being before you can best support other people.
I was going to ask you, Turia, sitting next to me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. How do you, reach out to your friends? Because I know it looks different for everyone.
In terms, of mental health?
Or just, generally, if you want to know how a friend's really doing. Do you want to do the same?
I think there may be this idea with some Māori, I think definitely with me and my mates kind of thing. Yeah. I think sometimes you do feel anxious and stuff, but there's this kind of stigma in the Māori world, just get on and get with it. Yeah. Or don't, I don't know how to word it, but so don't be a pansy kind of thing. There actually is that kind of corded around people. Yeah. Not my friends and whānau, but just I hear that corded all,
Toughen up or
and it's So I think the way I reach out, I mean, I'm with my friends every day, honestly. I'm with
Okay,
them
we're going to do
every-
the scene. I'm going to be your friend.
Good day. Yeah.
And you reach out to me.
Like, I reach out to help you, or I reach out, like,
No,
I
you
need
reach
help?
out to help me. We're doing the scene. I'm your friend.
Okay.
Okay.
Sup, G?
Hey.
How are you?
Okay.
How are you really? I would, yeah.
Yeah, okay. They actually hit real. That was good.
Yeah.
You did good.
I mean, yeah. I mean, when my mates have, like, we've all gone through shit, you know? And when my
Yeah.
mates hit the shit, I feel like everyone kind of has their role to play with your mates.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not the mate who does those cool shit.
Yeah.
I'm the mate who's like, you ready to, like, drink? Like, I'm the, you know, I
Yeah.
feel like we all have our roles to play. And I feel like there's a different approach to helping a mate.
Completely,
Like, there's
completely.
different, like,
And I think you're lucky if you're in a friendship circle where there are, you know, a wide range of people and they all have their different, you know, the mum of the group or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
their different roles. I think also on that note too, sorry to interrupt your role
No,
play,
no,
but
no.
it just came
It's
to
done.
my
It's done. That
mind
was
that sometimes like it can be quite confronting sitting face to face and asking someone how they are.
Yeah,
So
straight
I was talking to someone recently and they said they really enjoy having these conversations when they're in the car with their friend because you're not staring
Look
directly
forward,
at
eh?
them. You're focused on what you're doing and it kind of can ease that sort of tension and that uncomfortableness of being like, oh, I'm really struggling at the moment. So sit in your car
There's
or
a
your
reason
boot.
we're in.
or your boot,
There's a reason we're in
beautiful
cars.
view.
We love a car chat. I love a car chat, like a
So
parked
great, yeah.
chat. We've kind of implied it, but we haven't explicitly said it. Sort of reaching out to people and talking about mental health can be really hard.
Yeah.
And these conversations are hard, and to be probably, one of the first on social media to talk about it. Why do you think it is so hard for us to have these conversations when all of us have mental health?
I think there's a few reasons. I think there's still a lot of stigma attached to mental health and perhaps more so mental illness. I think there's a real lack of understanding and education around what it is like to be someone that's, you know, fighting a mental illness or really struggling. I completely agree with what you're saying because I think, you know, we often talk about if someone was to break their leg, multiple people would run over and make sure that they're okay. But if someone's crying in a corner, it can be a bit more awkward or uncomfortable to approach them and have these conversations. And so I think it comes down to a number of things. I know for me personally, when it came to sharing my own story, there was a lot of shame for what I went through. I felt that, you know, it was going to interrupt, you know, my job opportunities and that people were going to judge me and people were going to always think of me as the girl that had an eating disorder or was really unwell with OCD, whatever it may have been. I guess I worried that I was going to be labelled, and that label, I guess, stopped me from reaching out or acknowledging what I was going through, if that makes sense.
No.
Yeah.
And because people kind of like this, they kind of like generalize mental illness, but there are heaps of different ones. Like, you said that you had an eating disorder, which I actually didn't know till right now. That's a part of mental illness. I think because some people think because it's a physical thing, it wouldn't actually be classified as that.
Yeah, sure. So eating disorders are very complicated illnesses. They are illnesses of the mind, and it's really important to, I guess, share, and it's one of my biggest messages is there's this stereotype or this expectation or perception that you can tell if someone has an eating disorder by looking at them, when actually a lot of the time you can't. You know, eating disorders come in all different shapes and sizes and do not discriminate, and anyone can struggle with one. So that's the first point I want to make. But yeah, mental illness, it's a very broad term, and there's lots of different you know, things that fit under what a mental illness is. But yeah, they're very misunderstood, and yeah, we need to talk about it.
I mean, I guess that like eating disorders, like I think that you would be the typical chick who could see the ribcage and stuff. But is there an eating disorder on the other side of the spectrum?
So there's a wide range again. So you've got, to name a few, you've got anorexia, which often, or the way you're describing, as I assume that's what you're talking about, someone that's you know, severely underweight. You've got atypical anorexia, when someone meets all the signs but they're not underweight. You've got bulimia nervosa, when people are making themselves sick or exercising and purging through exercising. You've got binge eating disorder. You've got ARFID, which is a restricted food intake disorder. There's, again, it's like, such a wide thing, and you're so not alone when you think that eating disorders are just this kind of one type of thing, because that's the way they're portrayed in a lot of our media, a lot of our movies, as a skinny white female.
It's so hard as well, because obviously if you're struggling with like an addiction or that kind of thing to, say, alcohol, you can cut alcohol out of your life and be sober forever, but you have to confront food
Completely.
regularly and all the time.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's why I feel now, you know, I'm recovered, I'm very, very well, and I often talk about that you, especially in my case, I had anorexia, and so my recovery involved facing this fear of food constantly. I couldn't avoid eating. You need food to survive, which is exactly what you're just saying. And so it is one of those things that the only way out is through, and the only way to overcome fear is to face it, but you're constantly having to go against what your mind's telling you shouldn't be doing, which seems crazy, I know, which seems crazy. Yeah.
We talked about briefly before that kind of attitude of like toughen up or like don't be a baby or whatever. Where do you think that comes from?
I think a lot of it is generational. We did a men's campaign a while ago through Voices of Hope, and we talked to specifically men for this men's campaign, and a lot of them said that, you know, growing up, New Zealand's a real sporting culture as well, so there's this sort of like boys don't cry, get on with it, grow up,
toxic,
you know, like
masculinity.
It's weak if you speak. It's a toxic I can never say that. Toxic masculinity. There we are. Honestly, every time, TM, it's a TM. So I think it is. I think it comes from that. I think it's generational as well. You know, if we go back to perhaps my grandparents' era, they weren't talking about mental health or mental illness as openly as we are now. There's still that huge stigma attached, and I think also lack of education. Like people aren't, you know, aware of what it's truly like to be unwell with mental illness. So again, you know, think it's just kind of like a get on with it, you know, don't worry when actually you're completely worried, you know, or you know, click out of it or snap out of it or whatever it is, and it's not that easy.
Yeah, I think it's like important to acknowledge how we sometimes uphold those same stereotypes. One that I've been trying to like get across lately is being more intentional in the words that I use.
Love that. Love that.
I'm terrible at that.
In high school I was real bad at using like mental illnesses as descriptor words for stuff.
I'm so OCD is a very common one.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff, and just clocking it, or even like I'm trying not to say crazy. I usually say wild now.
Wild,
just because it's like, you know, it's like for people who experience.
I love that. I love that, because I think, and going back, you know, making this about me again, but with the whole like I'm so OCD, it is about me. Welcome to my episode. No, the whole I'm so OCD. Like I've caught myself saying it in the past.
But are you allowed to say it?
Well, I just think it's one of those things. It's for someone that's fought OCD, it really minimises the experience, and I guess invalidates what I went through and belittles, or what's the word? OCD's such a major struggle. And when people chuck it around because they like to have their coloured pencils in order, you know, it's a bit of a slap in the face. So I think I love that, being more intentional, and I think subconsciously I'm trying to do the same. And I think it's a really, you know, you're going to mess up, and that's okay, but at least you're trying. You know?
Yeah, that's true. I think like with nowadays, it's kind of hard to see where mental illness is now compared to back then, because like you said, back in the day they didn't really talk about it, but now with more social media it kind of seems like it could occur more.
Or we're talking about it more. I always have this dilemma in my head. A lot goes on in my head, but I'm like, I guess the thing is, I do know that we're more open about mental health now. I know that, and I truly wholeheartedly believe that. But I also, like you're saying, is part of that the fact that we are more connected and we're talking more online, and we've got social media as a platform to, I guess, have these conversations. But I definitely see, and even just from conversations, like I said, with my grandma, you know, having conversations about what they talked back in the days, and you know what we're talking about now, it's still quite shocking to them that we're having such open conversations. So definitely been a shift in that sort of thing, which is great, and hopefully it will just continue, and we'll be talking about it more, and opening up some more conversations. And
do you think like social media, like TikTok, kids are always on their iPads on the TikTok and stuff, do you think that's actually going to develop mental illness more or more rapidly?
I don't necessarily know if it's like causal. I don't know if it's going to cause it. I think social media is a really interesting thing. I think social media can be really positive, and it can be really detrimental to people's well-being. And I think, you know, we always like to, you know, push the message. It's about how you use social media. I know a thing that I always tell people is like, go through and do a social media cleanse. Like, unfollow anyone that makes you feel less than your amazing self. If you find yourself comparing yourself to the girl that you've just, you know, followed and you don't like your body compared to hers or whatever it may be, like going through and I guess taking some responsibility of how you use social media is really important. But I definitely think social media is an interesting one, and I guess, like I said, there's some real positives, which I think when we use social media for voices of hope, and not saying we're the only ones that use it in positive light, because we're definitely not, but to be able to, I guess, inject some hope and some like authentic content between something that's often so curated and such a highlight reel and such a small percentage of someone's life is really important. It brings some reality to something or a platform that can often seem too perfect.
Ooh, I think having boundaries around social media as well for yourself, like I very much view Instagram like a scrapbook. I'm like, this is my best moments, like a scrapbook. But I know that if you're not conscious and like deciding that for yourself, it can be very like slippery slope, I guess.
Yeah, completely.
In terms of how you feel about yourself. And
I think that I think it comes down to boundaries, and you just kind of almost like having an open conversation with yourself, or just having an agreement within yourself of how you're going to use, because completely, and there's nothing wrong with that, using it like a scrapbook, you know, that's fine too. But I know a lot of people do respect or connect to really authentic content. And I'm not saying yours isn't at all, but I'm just saying in general.
I'm talking about mental health, like I really, like COVID and lockdowns, especially for us Aucklanders who have had a few, like almost one every year now. Like that's how it's been going. Like how has that, do you think, well, I mean, I think we all know it's affected everyone, but how bad do you think lockdown has kind of contributed to people's mental health?
It's an interesting thing. I think, you know, something that I personally struggled with lockdown was, I guess, the uncertainty, not knowing when it was going to end. I know for a lot of people, you know, financial hardships have become part of it. People have lost their jobs. And something that we've heard from a lot of the people that I guess are part of the Voices of Hope community and beyond is that lack of connection. I think, you know, social media is such an amazing thing to connect with people, but there's nothing like sitting down and having, you know, a chat like we're doing today and having that face-to-face interaction. So I think, COVID's definitely put a spanner in the works. I know I've talked to some people who have found the time quite helpful because they've been given time to work on themselves. And I think, you know, from a lot of people I've talked to, they've tried to find the silver linings, and I think there have been a few, and I feel lucky to have found a few myself. But I think, you know, we have to be realistic that for a lot of people, the last 2.5 years have been incredibly difficult, and people's mental health has been impacted.
You know, other than everyone says, like, if you're feeling claustrophobic and there, go for a walk and stuff, like, are there other kind of practices
tools
or things that people could use that we probably don't know about that you could?
Yeah, I think for me, having some sense of routine was really important. So, you know, what that looked like for me wasn't necessarily at 9 a.m. I'm going to do this, and 10 a.m. I'll do this, and, you know, being that sort of structured. But I guess setting some sort of goals for the day, like I'm going to call my grandma today, I'm going to go for a walk around the block, I'm going to read a few pages of my book, because I think by doing those things and setting myself little tasks and putting some sort of routine in my day, I felt some sense of accomplishment. I think a lot of people I talked to, you know, felt like they weren't being productive enough. They were seeing these people online that were like, you know, painting their walls and building gardens, and so they compared themselves to them. And I think, you know, sometimes the most productive thing you can do is absolutely nothing and just rest and chill out and be, and that's totally fine too. So I think there's lots of little tools like that. I do think fresh air is amazing, stepping outside when you can, and making sure you're connecting with people, whether that's FaceTime, whether that's Zoom, WhatsApp, whatever it may be, just staying connected.
Do you think mental health in New Zealand, there's such a broad term, but do you think it's moving in the right direction? Because, you know, I hear a lot of things from like Mike King and like lots of other organisations, and I feel like it's actually getting worse.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I could write a list of things that need to change in this area. I think there's a real, there's still, I do believe, a lack of resource and funding and people that can treat those that are, you know, really struggling. A lot of the conversations we have with people are, you know, conversations around the fact that they're on 18 months waiting lists, or they're waiting, you know, 6 weeks to be seen by someone, and then they're referred to someone else. And so, I mean, yes, I hope, and there are things that are chipping away that I do believe will make a difference. However, we've got a heck of a long way to go, and I don't want to sugarcoat that. I think the system is broken, and I'm happy to say that. It's broken and it needs some serious work, and I really hope the lived experience voice is part of that, because we're the ones that have been through it. We know what it's like to be in the system. We know where things need to change, and so have our voice and have us part of that discussion.
Cool.
I had to agree, like, it feels very broken at the moment, the system, and that's reflected in the stats as well, of like, you know, what's going on, especially like
Māori men.
as Māori men, right? Look at the stats, they're freaking dire, like they're so bleak, and I reckon as well, like a lot of the solutions that are being offered aren't necessarily taking into account different cultures, right?
Yeah, completely.
Like, in terms of, a little while ago, I was on the hunt for a counsellor, and I wanted to find a Māori counsellor because I didn't want to spend sessions like explaining who I was in order to get to like the actual stuff.
And why you done that?
I was like, the issue is nothing to do with being Māori, but you need to understand nuances about that to get to the thing. And it was a hunt. It was a needle in a haystack. Like, and then I was in Tauranga at the time, calling you out, Tauranga. And I ended up having to phone someone from Kirikiriroa, Hamilton. That was like the closest.
Just to find some support.
Yeah, that was the closest Māori counsellor.
Provider. That's sad. I feel like to take that courageous step, because asking for help or acknowledging that you need more support can be one of the most difficult things to do. So then when you're not met with that support and you're told that you're going to be put on a wait list, or you're told that you've got to, you know, go to Hamilton or whatever it may be, or the only person that can help you and what you need. Completely. It's completely invalidating. Like, we need to be met with the support we need. And I think you're completely right. Culturally, you know, I think everyone's journey is different, but we need to find people we match with, and we can feel connected to, and that we feel like we're getting the best out of.
We're just going everywhere, eh?
I love it.
How do you think is a way that we can convince more rangatahi to care about mental illness? Because I feel like it's better if we catch it early, you know. And I guess how I was brought up, you don't actually know what to look out for. So how would you encourage rangatahi to kind of care about more about their own and about it in general?
Well, I hope on like a broad spectrum, I hope schools and education, you know, prioritise it more. I think, especially with our youngins or our rangatahi, you know, even being able to recognise your emotions and what you're feeling can be so confusing, because you can go through a million emotions a day and not know what's going on. And so being able to be like, okay, this is what happy means, and this is what sad means, and this is what anger means, and that all these emotions are okay, you know, to a certain level. We need to keep an eye on ourselves, and if we're getting too angry, we need to talk to someone about it. So again, I think it just comes down to education and awareness, and I think, you know, there's some amazing podcasts, but also YouTube videos that, you know, talk our younger children through, you know, what it's like to have feelings and what it's like to be stressed, and I guess just always pushing the message that you don't have to do this alone. If you're feeling really low, or you're feeling really angry, or you're feeling the feels, whatever the feels may be, it's really important, and it's completely okay for you to tell someone. So that'd probably be my main advice there. But I think it does come from somewhat of a higher level, that we need to have the higher beings or powers or whoever it is, whether that's government or our teachers or whatever it may be, just really opening up these conversations, and I guess being role models in that space too.
So the Voices of Our Hope and
Love Your Kite.
Love Your Kite.
So Love Your Kite is little side hustle. It's something that I launched. It's an app resource. So it's an app for individuals that are struggling with an eating disorder. And so it's full of 30 plus weeks of activities, things that I found really helpful, and things that I've gathered from those that I interact with on a daily basis, and you know, it's on your phone, it's really private. Every single day you get sent one activity, and it's one activity that's going to help you on your, or hopefully help you on your, you know, your healing journey or recovery journey. And it's not to be used in replacement of, you know, professional help. It's an as well as, but we've got, you know, close to 2,000 users from all over the world. We had someone from Malta download it the other day. I don't even know where Malta is, but apparently it's like the 6th smallest country in the world or something crazy. And so if anything, it's just really shown me the need for more support, especially in that space, both in New Zealand and abroad. So it's an app, long story short.
Are there any other kind of organisations that you would really advise other people to reach out to other than those?
Completely. So as I mentioned, Youthline, and I was going to say WhatsApp, but it's 0800 Watts. Oh, it is WhatsApp. Youthline and 0800 WhatsApp. So they're both free counselling telephone for youth and children. You can pick up the phone and have a chat to them.
I mean, I feel like some people might think, are those legit? Because do you actually ring a phone?
You literally ring a phone and you meet with a counsellor that's on the other end of the phone and you talk to them about what's going on. These are trained people that are trained to be on the end of the phone line. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure Youthline and 0800 WhatsApp and 1737, which is another number, they all have text lines. So if you don't want to pick up the phone, which can be a really, really hard thing to do, you can text and have a text conversation with, again, someone that's trained and is there to talk to you. So I think those are really important. There's some really great in-school programs. I know the John Kirwan Foundation's just launching something at the moment, or just has launched something called The Mighty, and so it's a mental health program within schools. Mike King does some great work. I think there's some really kind of powerhouses in this space. And what I like to say to schools is, bring someone in to talk to the kids, have an assembly and let's talk about emotions and let's talk about mental health and let's have these conversations. But there's also a couple of great books. There's one called Araha's Way, and it's about recognising emotions, and it takes you through the journey of someone that's, struggled. Just there are resources out there. You just got to have a look.
Like, lastly, where do you kind of see, how do you see yourself going forward with continuing your mental health journey, not just for yourself, but like helping others?
Yeah, completely. So in myself, as I said, I'm very, very well, but I think I continue to get better every day, as we all do as humans. We're constantly learning and evolving. That sounds very like hippie, but it's true. So I think for me, like just continuing what I'm doing, continuing to use my story to give hope to other people. I'm really interested in getting more into, I guess, the policy side of things. So like I said, in terms of, at a governmental level, whatever it may be, lending my lived experience and my voice to help other people. And in terms of Voices of Hope, we want to grow our team, we want to be more active, we want to be doing multiple campaigns a year, we just want to be doing more of what we are doing because we know it works. We're big believers, which I think I said at the beginning, is that one person shares their story, it opens up, the opportunity or a safe place for so many other people to reach out and to acknowledge that they're not alone. So just more of that on an even larger scale.
Cool.
Yeah.
I also want to write a book. There we are.
Ooh.
That'll be great.
I want to write a book.
Cop that book when it comes out.
Yeah. Got to write a book. I don't know when, but I want to.
Write it.
Start writing.
I don't know what about yet, but I want to write a book.
It's going to be a book written. It's going to be a pretty big book. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. Obviously, mental health is like this huge sort of Mount Everest. Like we could talk about so many things and there's so many paths of things we could have talked about, but it was so great to open the conversation and to literally start talking about it, which is kind of the whole kaupapa.
Completely. Well, I just feel honoured to, be in this space, in my boot with you guys, having these conversations because, you guys opening up this, I just know it will help a lot of other people. So thank you for having me. It's a real honour.
Oh, thank you for being in the boot. That's Tuku Talks. I'm Janaye Henry.
I'm Turia Schmidt-Pickett.
I'm Genevieve Mora.
Stunning.
Haere rā, te whānau.
Awesome.